Thank you. Legends, they say, never really die. What if, however, their last moments reveal more to us than a lifetime of celebrity could? With a whisper, the Lord of Darkness, Ozzy Osbourne, startled the earth. No fan was ready for what transpired in his last days, away from the stage lights and behind closed doors. His final words, which were delivered quietly, will shatter your heart. What actually transpired during those last moments? And before the world fell silent, what did he say? Let's get started. The last days. The planet could sense it by 2025, summer. Around Ozzy Osbourne, something had changed. The Prince of Darkness had suffered from a string of health issues for years, which appeared to get worse every season. These last days, however, felt different. Not more raucous, not more disorderly. Indeed, disturbingly silent. Silence has arrived like an old friend after a lifetime of yelling stages and thunderous applause. Ozzy, who never backs down from a challenge, embraced reality with an odd calm. The famous rock star had been under close observation at his estate in Buckinghamshire, a large house nestled in the English countryside that had progressively evolved into more of a hospital than a home. Every appearance was scrutinized more once he revealed in 2020 that he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Supporters kept an eye out for even the smallest movements, such as a slurred word, a stiff step, or a shaking hand. Ozzy's physique was gradually deteriorating, while he attempted to move forward with the same careless charm that had kept him going for 50 years. His performance had substantially declined by 2023. He had suffered nerve damage from years of spine surgery, following a fall in 2019 that impairs speech and balance. Close family members claimed that he never fully recovered from the persistent agony. He was no longer on tour. In the rare times he spoke, he seemed more appreciative than ever, despite canceling public engagements. The tone of his voice softened in interviews and short speeches. Still humorous and disrespectful, yet moved by introspection. His closest family members, especially his wife Sharon, had been subtly getting ready for what many thought was coming. Throughout it all, she was his pillar of support, steadfastly attending to his care and business. Sharon reportedly started restricting visits around the beginning of July 2025. Only loyal helpers and members of the immediate family were permitted inside the house. The severity of the situation behind closed doors was unknown to the outer world. In spite of all, Ozzy would not go away. He insisted on attending family dinners, laughing when he could, and staying up late watching old horror movies, even when he was at his weakest. He continued to receive fan letters, which he would read aloud on good days. According to family insiders, those were the only times he appeared to be fully awake and aware of the pulse of those who had shaped him. Then, however, came the setbacks. There were rumors that he suffered a bad case of the flu in late June. He had been hospitalized for a short time because of problems, according to insiders close to the family, even though the initial headlines didn't seem concerning. Physicians acquainted with his medical background were concerned that the disease would exacerbate his Parkinson's symptoms and put further stress on his already compromised immune system. He returned home after spending a few nights under observation, but according to sources, he was never quite the same. Ozzy needed help with almost every daily job as his mobility continued to deteriorate. He was still there in his mind, though. According to one nurse, he was like a man stuck in a non-listening body. Every time his kids visited, he insisted on having his tea with the exact quantity of sugar and continued to crack jokes. Every hushed exchange felt more burdensome than the last. Those in his immediate vicinity acknowledged him quietly. The last remnants of a flame that had once illuminated the planet were what they were witnessing. In those last days, he spent a lot of time staring out the window, according to those who knew him well. Just the garden, the sky and the birds, nothing specific. Perhaps he was recalling his early years spent in Aston. Perhaps he had visions of stadiums crowded with fans yelling his name. Perhaps he had nothing on his mind. However, he typically kept whatever was on his mind to himself. He was still waiting for something, though. That much was obvious. There was a subtle urgency, a restlessness beneath the surface, as though he knew that even with a life this big, there was still one last thing that needed to happen. There was one final note that needed to be played. However, what others around him were unaware of at the time was that it would happen without warning. And it wouldn't happen in front of thousands of people. There would be no stage. It would leave the globe in tears and be far more personal, quiet, and human. However, Ozzy had one more thing to provide before that time came. Another surprise. One final method to remind everyone that legends don't just fade away. They reverberate from the outset. Although it was constructed as an homage, everyone involved understood its deeper significance. Ozzy Osbourne made his last public appearance on July 5, 2025, amid the last rays of a warm Birmingham evening. It was a celebration disguised as a farewell, and the symptoms were obvious to those who were paying careful attention. Back to the beginning was a one-night reunion in his hometown that took place at Villa Park, a few miles from the factories and mists of Aston, where it all started. Insiders reported a different vibe despite the concert's promotion, avoiding words like final or goodbye. Sharon had been pushing the performance for months, not only as a thank you to fans, but also as a sort of living wake, a chance for the great to take a final seat in the spotlight surrounded by music, love and memories. In the middle of the stage, Ozzy was assisted onto a specially constructed throne. This was no delusion. He didn't try to hide his health problems, which were obvious. A mosaic of his life was projected onto enormous screens on either side of the raised chair. Pictures from his early years, film from his crazy tour, and more tender private moments with his family. The approximately 50,000 people in the stadium fell silent as he was given the microphone. He spoke just enough, nothing more. "I'm at a loss for words," he started. "All this time you've been by my side. With all of my heart, thank you." The crowd then let forth a yell. He didn't sing. He was over that phase of his life. However, he observed. He took in the passion, the lights and the noises. Legendary guests graced the stage one by one. Supported by Zakk Wylde and other old partners, Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler joined in for a melancholic performance of War Pigs. Younger musicians like Dave Grohl and Corey Taylor even paid unexpected tributes to a guy whose voice had come to embody the sound of defiance. Emotions ran high backstage according to several who were present. Tears were wiped away by crew members who had toured with Ozzy for decades. On the surface the atmosphere was joyous, yet there was also a sense of melancholy. It was obvious that this was the end. The incredible amount of money raised added to the event's surreal atmosphere. The live stream attracted millions of viewers worldwide, despite the tickets being relatively inexpensive by industry standards. Over $100 million was raised for Parkinson's research and children's charities through the concert, retail sales, and private donations. The causes were very personal to Ozzy, according to those close to him, not only due to his diagnosis, but also because of the help he had gotten when he was at his most vulnerable. He left before the entire performance. An hour or so later, as the music roared on without him, he was silently carried backstage and out of the spotlight. However, nobody noticed that he was departing early. It was the ideal way out, if anything. A boisterous farewell followed by a quiet retreat. Social internet was ablaze with tributes that evening. Tokyo 2's fans. Paulo posted snippets of his look. Grainy pictures of crazy nights and blurry tours were frequently included with the recollections that celebrities, musicians and long-standing friends shared. However, they all shared a single characteristic. They were aware that something had just come to an end. Not a career's demise. That was over. Fame is not over. That would never go away, but it would mark the end of Ozzy's public life. With thunder and tenderness, the curtain had closed softly. And now something else was starting in the silence that followed. Something more subdued, something definitive. After the stage lights went down, and the noise of the audience was forgotten, Ozzy Osbourne went back to her house in Buckinghamshire. With almost 12,000 square feet of peacefully mowed lawns, stone walkways, and ancient oak trees, the estate was a vast property tucked away in the English countryside. The house was large, but it had shrunk in a way that only illness and time can cause. Whole rooms have been transformed over the years into drug refrigerators, oxygen equipment, physical therapy settings, private nurse stations, and care areas. Once resonating with the sounds of late-night laughter and rehearsals, the house has transformed into a haven of peace. A familiar hand wheeled Ozzy inside. Sharon is by his side all the time. She maintained her composure and practicality in the face of the outside world, providing press updates when necessary, while carefully deciding what information was private and what was public. However, friends claim that she was the emotional fulcrum that kept everything together inside those walls. In the days that followed, family members remained a constant presence, despite the man she loved gradually becoming more fragile. When Jack arrived by plane from Los Angeles, Kelly completely rearranged her schedule to spend as much time as possible with her father. Grandchildren were even observed tiptoeing silently along the hallways, recognizing the gravity of the situation without fully comprehending it. The family never made a formal declaration, or had any dramatic discussions about what was going on, according to later insiders. All of them just knew. More meaning was conveyed by their silence than by any words. Everyday existence found a delicate rhythm. Ozzy would awaken in the middle of the morning, frequently after a nurse had administered his medication and checked his vitals. Breakfast was a simple meal, sometimes consisting only of toast and tea. On his best days, he would ask to see repeats of vintage rock documentaries or old horror movies. Nobody cared that he hardly completed them and frequently fell asleep in the middle. It has to do with comfort. His mood was what most people around him noticed. He wasn't restless, scared, or angry. He was still. He wasn't ignorant though. Not at all. Even in his craziest moments, Ozzy had always possessed a unique sense of intuition. That sense became more acute in those last days at home. He would make eye contact and maintain it for a moment longer than normal. He would abruptly extend his hand to take a hand. Just touch, no words. He seemed to be mentally calculating the remaining seconds without becoming alarmed. There were few visitors. Only the closest of friends were permitted entry, and even then, only for a short time. According to one long-standing bandmate, the encounter was harrowing in its peace. Instead of the pandemonium or tension he had anticipated, he saw Ozzy nodding softly, pale and slender but utterly present. With the same meals at the same times, the same prescriptions, and the same polite reminders, the staff kept up a soothing routine. However, there was a subliminal message that nobody said out loud. It was becoming more difficult. It was getting harder to breathe. Sleep lasted longer and came more frequently. Even simple gestures of communication like handshakes, murmurs, and head nods became erratic. Nevertheless, there were times of distinct clarity amid the physical decline. Ozzy apparently sat there one evening for about an hour staring out the window. No TV, no music, and no conversation. Like he may have looked at a crowd at a festival decades before, he watched the garden wave in the breeze. When Sharon asked him what he was thinking, he said, "Nothing. Everything." It was difficult to determine if he was reliving previous experiences or just living in the now during his final moments at home. However, it was evident to anyone in his vicinity that he was anticipating something. Waiting, not fighting, nor running away. Like a performer who is aware that the curtain is about to fall and that the encore is over. The fact that the last moment was approaching was unknown to them at the time. And how that moment would occur somewhere much more private than the calm hallways of his house. The medical facility. It was swift, quicker than anyone anticipated. Ozzy Osbourne was admitted to a London private hospital in the second week of July 2025, under what was initially referred to as precautionary observation. Overnight, a high fever had developed, followed by exhaustion and dyspnea. The family took swift action because of his lengthy history of health problems. Without hesitation, Sharon made the choice, setting up a private medical transfer by mid-morning. Even the hospital personnel, some of whom had previously cared for him, felt that this time was different, even though he was stabilized in a matter of hours. The space was clinical, sterile, and silent. The low hum of monitoring equipment is the only sound to break the sterile white walls. Ozzy has always detested hospitals, referring to them as drab and gray tiny jails. This time, however, he did not resist. He gave the nurses freedom to work. He consented to the oxygen mask, scans, and IVs. He wasn't engaged in combat. He was giving in. One nurse described the odd stillness that surrounded him. Presence, not resignation, not sedation. He looked at almost every person that entered the room. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was with intention and purpose. Sharon refused to leave his side for longer than a few minutes at a time. She occasionally stroked his knuckles with her thumb while holding his hand between hers. Soon later, Jack and Kelly showed there and alternated sitting with him. They asked few questions, they were not obliged to. His body was just too exhausted to recover this time. The doctors had previously explained, even though every precaution was being taken. For the majority of the second day, Ozzy lay with his eyes closed, opening them only occasionally to stare around the room, as though seeking something or someone. At one point, Sharon asked him if he was hurting by leaning in. He gave a headshake. "No," he muttered. "I'm just thinking." The family got together once again that evening, well before midnight. His breathing had become more laborious and slower, but the monitors continued to beep regularly. A doctor gave Sharon a little nod while checking his pulse. It was obvious that the time had come. Then Ozzy opened his eyes and turned to face his family in a voice so low it was hardly heard. His statement was straightforward. "No big farewell, no showmanship. You will actually cry when you hear Ozzy Osbourne's last words before he passed away. Tell them that I enjoyed doing it all the way through. From the bottom of my heart, thank you all." This is very heartbreaking, isn't it? It was quiet in the room. Nobody said anything. Nobody started crying right away. They simply sat with him, clinging to those words and allowing them to become as dust. Later, a nurse told a colleague that it was unlike anything she had ever seen. She remarked that he seemed to know what people needed to hear. As if he had been holding on to those words for decades, waiting for the ideal opportunity to use them. There was silence for the following few hours, according to reports. The family surrounded him with love rather than fear as they sat with him. Ozzy fell asleep and woke up. He occasionally gave Sharon's hand a squeeze. He occasionally blinked slowly while staring at the ceiling. He didn't say anything else. 5 decades of glory, chaos, and survival seemed to have been condensed into a single sentence for everyone in the room. A silent yet heartfelt thank you. To the millions who had followed his journey, one last message. From yelling Black Sabbath fans in the 1970s, to the younger generations who were familiar with him from magazine headlines, memes, and reality TV. It wasn't the farewell that people had anticipated. It had greater strength than that. It was straightforward, human, honest, and it put everyone who heard it in utter disarray. Encircled with affection. Every major outlet carried the news on the morning of July 22, 2025. Osbourne Ozzy was dead. In a brief but sincere message, the family made the announcement immediately. With more sadness than words can express, we share that Ozzy passed peacefully, surrounded by family, love and light, it said, in part. We asked for privacy as we mourned the loss of a beloved husband, father, grandfather, and icon. The response was swift, with fans, celebrities, musicians, and public figures from all over the world posting tributes on social media within minutes. It was the quiet end of a long, wild chapter in music history, and the words "rest in power" Ozzy trended around the world for more than 24 hours. The loss was personal for his family, and Sharon, who had been with him for more than 40 years, remained largely silent in the days that followed. According to people close to the family, she was calm but clearly broken. She had always handled the business, the media, the tours, the chaos, and now she was handling intense private and overwhelming grief. Jack and Kelly used well-chosen words when they posted a picture of themselves as children sitting on Ozzy's shoulders on social media, captioning it, "My hero, my teacher, my dad." Kelly's message was even shorter. "The world is quieter now. I love you forever." In the days that followed, condolences came in from all around the industry. In a joint statement, former Black Sabbath comrades referred to him as the voice of a generation and a brother till the end. "I already miss your voice." Artists from different genres paid their tribute, including Elton John, who had once worked with him on a ballad. Ozzy was chaos and compassion in one soul. Tony Ayuma, who had shared a stage and a lifelong friendship with him, stated that he felt a bit of my soul had gone with him. The most moving tributes, however, came from fans. Candlelight vigils were held in cities all over the world.
In Birmingham, fans lit candles on the steps of Aston's old factories, the exact location where Ozzy's journey started. And in Los Angeles, fans gathered outside the Rainbow Bar and Grill on Sunset Strip, scattering flowers, vinyl records, and handwritten letters along the sidewalk. There were rumors of a larger public memorial later in the year, possibly in Birmingham or Los Angeles, cities where his name still reverberated through streets and stadiums. But the family decided to keep his funeral private, despite the mourning's worldwide scope. Those close to the situation said the ceremony was small, attended only by Ozzy's immediate family and a few of his closest friends, with no cameras, no press, just music, memories and silence. The world was left to mourn in its own way for the time being though, and in many respects, the quietness of his death felt fitting because, despite all the chaos and craziness that had surrounded him during his life, Ozzy had passed away on his own terms. No curtain call, no spectacle, just a last breath in the arms of those he loved. Ozzy Osbourne didn't want to be remembered as a saint, yet he was gone, but not silent, never survival. And in the aftermath, what was left was a presence that persisted in every scream from the stage, every lyric that was whispered, and every fan who had ever sought solace in his voice. He frequently joked that he would be lucky to be remembered at all, but he did want, and had stated repeatedly in interviews, to be remembered as someone who lived. In many respects, that was what made him unique, not just the music, the controversy, or the spectacle, but the fact that he persevered. Ozzy became notably more introspective in his final interviews, particularly in the last few years.